What if I told you that the greatest writer in English history was an ordinary boy from a small town who never went to university and even had to run from the law? His incredible journey from nothing to becoming the immortal, William Shakespeare holds a secret for every English learner. To discover how his story can unlock your own potential, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories. We are going to talk about a man who understood the human heart better than almost anyone who has ever lived. He knew what it was like to love to lose, to feel powerful, and to feel afraid. You have probably heard of his stories like Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello. These are not just plays, they are like mirrors. They show us our own lives, our own feelings, love, power, sadness, ambition, everything that makes us human. He captured it all in his beautiful words. His work is so important, so powerful, that the English language itself would not be the same without him. So many words, so many phrases and ideas that we use every single day came from his brilliant mind. But how did he become William Shakespeare, the greatest writer in the history of the English language? He was not born into a rich family with a big house and a lot of money. He did not go to a famous university, yet his name became the most famous name in all of literature. So if you are learning English today, if you sometimes struggle to find the right words, if you ever wonder how you can express the feelings inside of you, then this story is for you. Because Shakespeare himself started as an ordinary boy. Just like you, just like me. This is a story of difficulty, of passion, and of a creativity that could not be stopped. So please sit back, relax, and listen carefully. This story will not only help your English listening skills, but I hope it will also fill you with a feeling of inspiration. It was a cold day in April in the year 1564. In a small English town called Stratford-upon-Avon, a baby boy was born. His parents, John and Mary Shakespeare, held him in their arms, full of love. They looked at their little son, never knowing that one day he would change the world. His name was William Shakespeare. Stratford-upon-Avon was not a big, busy city. It was a quiet town with narrow streets that twisted and turned. The houses were made of dark wood and stood close together. A gentle river, the River Avon, flowed peacefully through the town. The people here lived simple lives. They were farmers, traders, and craftsmen working with their hands every day. William's father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker. He made beautiful soft leather gloves and sold them at the market in the center of town. He was a hard-working man, and the people of Stratford respected him. His mother, Mary Arden, came from a family of wealthy farmers. She was a kind and strong woman, and her heart was full of love for her children. William was the third of their 8 children. You can imagine their house was always full of noise. The sounds of laughter of children chattering and the everyday sounds of a busy family filled the small rooms. But William was a little different. He was a quiet boy, and he was curious. He watched everything and everyone around him. He listened to the way people spoke, the way they laughed when they were happy, and the way their voices changed when they were sad. He didn't know it yet, but this special kind of curiosity, this deep attention to the world, would one day make him the greatest playwright of all time. In those days, of course, there were no televisions, no phones, and no internet. So how did people entertain themselves with stories? Sometimes groups of traveling actors would come to Stratford. They would set up a small stage in the street and perform plays for everyone. Young William would stand in the crowd and watch, his eyes wide with wonder and excitement. He loved listening to the old legends, the folk tales, and the heroic stories from history. With every story he heard, his own imagination grew stronger and brighter. When he was 7 years old, William started school. The school was a small, simple building. Inside, there were long wooden benches and a teacher who was very strict. But what William learned in that little room would shape his entire life. He studied Latin history, poetry, and literature. Latin was a very important language back then. It was the language of educated people, and young William was very good at it. He read the great stories from ancient Rome and Greece. He discovered writers like Ovid and Plutarch. Their powerful words and amazing stories stayed with him, planting seeds in his mind that would later grow into his own famous plays. But William wasn't just a boy who loved books. He also loved nature. He would take long walks through the green fields around his town. He would watch the river flow and listen to the songs of the birds in the trees. He played games with his friends, running through the streets and enjoying the simple fun of being a boy. But even then, there was something deep inside him, a hunger for words, for stories, and for understanding the meaning of life. Just when everything seemed to be going well, trouble arrived. William's father, who had once been a successful and respected businessman, began to have financial problems. He had borrowed money to grow his business, but things were not going as he had planned. This meant the family had less and less money. It was a very difficult time. There were even days when they struggled to have enough food on the table. William saw the worry in his father's eyes. He heard the sadness in his mother's voice. He learned at a young age that life was not always easy or fair. He learned that life is full of ups and downs, a lesson he would later write about with such powerful understanding in his plays. But instead of feeling sad or hopeless, he did what he always did. He watched. He listened. He felt every emotion very deeply. Even as a child, William had a special talent with words. He would make up little poems and rhymes to entertain his family. He loved to act out stories, pretending to be different characters for his friends. But no one in the quiet town of Stratford-upon-Avon could have known that this young boy, with his bright eyes and active imagination, would one day write the most famous plays in the world. For now, he was just William, a boy from a small town with very big dreams. And those dreams were about to take him on a journey far, far away from home. William Shakespeare was growing up quickly. By the time he was 14, he had read many books, he had heard hundreds of stories, and he had watched the traveling actors perform in the streets of his small town many times. But life at home was not getting any easier. His father's financial troubles were becoming worse. The man who was once a respected leader in the community was now struggling to pay the money he owed. The family, which had once lived in comfort, was now facing very hard times. Young William saw everything. He saw how quickly a person's life could change. He began to understand that nothing in this world was permanent, not money, not social position, not even happiness. But instead of letting this make him bitter or sad, he became more thoughtful, more observant, and more creative. He stored all of these difficult feelings and observations deep inside himself. And then something happened that would change the course of his life forever. By the time William was 18 years old, he was no longer a boy. He was a young man. And like many young men, he fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway. She was a beautiful and intelligent woman, known for being strong and independent. But there was something a little unusual about their love story. Anne was 26 years old. She was 8 years older than William. In those days, it was very uncommon for a younger man to marry an older woman. But love does not always follow the rules, does it? And William was deeply in love with Anne. However, something unexpected happened next. Before they could get married, Anne Hathaway became pregnant. This was a very serious situation in the 1500s. Society was extremely strict about these things. Having a child outside of marriage was seen as a great shame for both families. So William and Anne had to get married, and they had to do it quickly. In November of 1582, at just 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. He was still just a young man himself, trying to figure out his place in the world, and now he was about to become a father. 6 months after their wedding, Anne gave birth to their first child. A baby girl they named Susanna. Then, just 2 years later, in 1585, Anne gave birth to twins. A boy named Hamlet and a girl named Judith. So at only 21 years old, William Shakespeare was a husband and the father of 3 small children. Life was moving very, very fast. But there was a big problem. How was he going to support his new family? His father's business was still failing, and William had no steady job. He knew he had to find a way to earn money. But what could he do? He had no desire to become a glove maker like his father. He didn't own any land. He had no important family name, and he had no fortune. But he had something else. He had his words. He had his stories. And he had a burning desire inside of him to create. This brings us to a mysterious time in Shakespeare's life. The years between 1585 and 1592 are what historians call the lost years. They are called this because for these 7 years we have no records of what William Shakespeare was doing. No one knows for sure where he was or how he was supporting his family in Stratford. But there are a few interesting theories. One theory is that he became a school teacher. He was well educated and loved literature, so it is possible he worked as a private tutor for a rich family teaching their children. Another theory suggests he became an actor. Perhaps he joined a company of traveling players, the same kind of group he had watched with such excitement as a boy. This would have been his first step into the world of theater. There is another, more exciting story. Some people say that he got into legal trouble. The story goes that he was caught hunting deer illegally on the land of a rich and powerful man and had to run away from Stratford to avoid being punished. Whatever the real story is, one thing is certain. By the time William Shakespeare appeared in the history books again in 1592, he was no longer a small-town boy from Stratford. He was in London, the biggest city in England, and he was ready to take on the world. London in the late 1500s was a city bursting with energy, ambition, and opportunity. It was the heart of England's theater world, a place filled with actors, writers, and poets, all competing with each other to become famous. Shakespeare arrived in this huge, noisy city with no money, no powerful friends, and no experience. But he had something much more important. He had talent, he had determination, and he had an unstoppable passion for telling stories. He started by working as an actor in small theater groups. He learned everything he could. He studied the way actors spoke their lines, how they moved on the stage, and how they showed powerful emotions. And soon, he started writing his own plays. At first, he wrote simple, funny plays designed to make the audiences laugh. But as he became more confident, he realized he could do so much more. He could write plays that made people think, made them feel, and made them question the world around them. By the year 1592, Shakespeare was starting to become well known in the busy theater world of London. But not everyone was happy about his success. A very famous playwright at the time, a man named Robert Greene, wrote a letter insulting him. He called Shakespeare an upstart crow, which was a very nasty way of saying he was a nobody who was trying to act like he was a great writer. These words could have hurt Shakespeare deeply. They could have made him give up. But he didn't let them stop him. Instead, he worked even harder. He wrote more plays, he acted in more theaters, and he slowly but surely gained the respect of both the other actors and the cheering audiences. Then, in 1593, something terrible happened. A deadly disease known as the plague spread across London. It was so dangerous that all the public places, including the theaters, were forced to close. Suddenly, Shakespeare was without work. But did he give up? No. He adapted. Instead of writing plays for the stage, he started writing long poems. He wrote two very famous poems, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece. These poems became incredibly popular, and they made him both rich and famous. Even the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth I, was impressed by his beautiful writing. By 1594, the danger of the plague had passed, and the theaters in London opened their doors once again. Shakespeare immediately returned to doing what he loved most, writing and performing plays. From 1594 onwards, Shakespeare's career soared. He became a key member of a famous acting company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He was not just writing their plays. He was also acting in them. His plays were full of powerful human emotions that everyone could understand. There was the beautiful and tragic story of young love in Romeo and Juliet. There was the dark tale of power and ambition in Macbeth. There was the heartbreaking story of betrayal and revenge in Hamlet. And there was the intense drama of jealousy and madness in Othello. By the late 1590s, William Shakespeare was one of the most famous playwrights in all of England. But he didn't stop. He was always pushing himself, always wanting to achieve more. He wanted more success, more influence, and he wanted to create masterpieces that would be remembered forever. And that is exactly what he did next. In the year 1599, something truly extraordinary happened. Shakespeare and his acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, decided to build their very own theater. They called it the Globe Theater. Can you imagine it? A huge circular theater like a giant wooden O with a roof that was open to the sky. Thousands of excited people, rich and poor, would rush inside to find a place. The stage was set for some of the greatest plays ever written. This was Shakespeare's home. It was his dream come true. It was his kingdom. It was at the Globe that he presented his greatest works. Hamlet, the story of a prince struggling with revenge madness and his own existence. Macbeth, a dark and powerful tale about how ambition can destroy a person. Othello, a tragic story of love torn apart by jealousy. And Julius Caesar, a political drama full of betrayal and difficult choices. These were not just simple entertainment. They were powerful stories that made people think about their own lives, their own feelings, and their own place in the world. And soon, Shakespeare's amazing success brought him wealth that was beyond his wildest dreams. By the early 1600s, he was not just a famous writer. He was one of the richest playwrights in England. He owned a share in the Globe Theatre, which brought him a large income every time a play was performed. He earned money when his plays and poems were published as books which were sold all over England. He even received support from the royal court, which meant that the king and queen themselves admired his work. He bought several properties, including a very grand house back in his hometown of Stratford, a house called New Place. At a time when most writers struggled just to survive, Shakespeare was living a comfortable, wealthy life. But fame and money were not the most important things to him. He wanted something even bigger. In 1603, a historic event changed everything. Queen Elizabeth I, who had been a great supporter of the theater, died. Her successor was King James I. At first, the actors and playwrights of London were nervous. No one knew if the new king would appreciate theater, or if he might even decide to close the theaters for good. But Shakespeare did not have to worry. King James loved his work. In fact, he loved Shakespeare's plays so much that he personally invited Shakespeare's acting company to perform for him at the royal court. And then, something incredible happened. King James gave Shakespeare's company a royal title. They were no longer the Lord Chamberlain's men. They were now called the King's Men. This was the highest honor a theater company could receive. It meant they were the official actors for the king himself. They were protected and supported by the most powerful man in England. They would perform for kings, queens, and nobles. The boy from Stratford, the glovemaker's son, had become the most celebrated playwright in the history of England. Between 1603 and 1611, Shakespeare wrote some of his most famous and most profound plays. These were not just stories. They were deep reflections on life power, love, and loss. King Lear. The heartbreaking story of an old king betrayed by his own daughters. Macbeth, the dark and terrifying tale of ambition and guilt. And The Tempest, a magical and beautiful story about forgiveness and new beginnings. His writing during this time became darker, more emotional, and deeply philosophical. This was because Shakespeare himself was changing. He was growing older. He had experienced fame and fortune, but he had also known betrayal and loss. His plays became more personal, and his characters felt more real, more human than ever before. By 1611, William Shakespeare had achieved everything a writer could ever dream of. He was famous. He was rich. He was respected by kings. The boy from a small town had lived a life beyond imagination. He had written tragedies, comedies, and histories that changed the way people thought about life, love, power, and their own destiny. He had performed for royalty and had become one of the wealthiest and most respected men of his time. In the year 1613, Shakespeare made a decision that surprised many people. He decided to retire. For years, he had lived in the busy, noisy city of London, writing, acting, and directing plays. But deep in his heart, he missed his home. He missed the quiet streets of Stratford. He missed the green fields and the gentle river of his childhood. And most of all, he missed his family. So he packed his things and returned to New Place, his grand house in Stratford-upon-Avon. Here, he planned to spend the rest of his days in peace. He would wake up early in the morning and walk through his beautiful gardens, enjoying the quiet and the beauty of nature. He would sit by the fireplace in his large home, reading books and thinking about the incredible life he had lived. He spent precious time with his daughters Susanna and Judith, talking about life, love, and the future. Sometimes old friends and visitors from London would come to see him. They would ask for his advice on writing plays and poetry. But even though he was retired, his mind was never quiet. It was still full of stories. People who knew him then said that even in his final years, he would often sit for hours lost in his own thoughts, sometimes whispering words of poetry quietly to himself. Then in 1616, something unexpected happened. One evening, Shakespeare went to a dinner party with some of his close friends. It was a happy evening, and the room was filled with laughter, wine, and good conversation. But soon after that night, Shakespeare fell ill. Some people say he caught a fever. Others say it was a disease from the cold weather. No one knows for sure. But within just a few days, his health grew much worse. His family and his friends gathered around his bed. They knew that the greatest writer in English history was leaving this world. On April 23, 1616, at the age of 52, William Shakespeare took his last breath. The world had lost a genius, but his words would never die. Before he died, Shakespeare wrote a few lines that would be his final words to the world. He knew that sometimes, after a person was buried, their bones might be moved later. He wanted to make sure his final resting place was left in peace. So he wrote an epitaph, a short poem to be carved on his tombstone. It was a warning to anyone who might think of disturbing his grave. It said, "Good friend for Jesus's." sake forbear, to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Even in death, his words were powerful and unforgettable. When Shakespeare died, a deep sadness fell over the town of Stratford. People gathered at Holy Trinity Church, the very same church where he had been baptized as a baby, to say their final goodbyes. The church was filled with people. There were actors and writers from London, his family and friends, and the simple townspeople who had known him since he was just a boy. Tears were shed, quiet prayers were whispered, and his body was laid to rest in the very town where his incredible journey began. There were no grand monuments, no golden tombs, just a simple grave marked with his own words. But little did the world know that this was not the end. It was just the beginning of his legacy. Shakespeare's body may have been buried in the ground, but his words refused to die. His plays continued to be performed. His books continued to be read. His name continued to be spoken with awe and respect. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. And yet Shakespeare remained alive in the hearts and minds of people all across the world. His works were translated into every major language on earth. His stories inspired millions of other writers, filmmakers, and poets. His words became a part of our everyday speech with phrases like, "to be or not to be," "all the world's a stage," and "a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." His life was proof that words have a special kind of power. The power to inspire, the power to heal, and the power to change the world. Even today, more than 400 years later, Shakespeare is still everywhere. His plays are performed in theaters from New York to Tokyo. His books are studied in schools and universities in every country. His words appear in movies, in songs, and in speeches. Why? Because Shakespeare understood human nature better than anyone. He wrote about love, betrayal, ambition, jealousy, fate, and dreams, things that every single human being can relate to, no matter where or when they live. He showed us that love can be beautiful, but it can also be tragic, like in Romeo and Juliet. He showed us that the desire for power can corrupt even the strongest hearts, like in Macbeth. He showed us that betrayal can come from the people we trust the most, like in Julius Caesar. And he showed us that life is full of uncertainty and mystery, like in Hamlet. His stories remind us of who we are and who we have the potential to become. If Shakespeare were alive today, I believe he would have one message for you. Dream big. Tell your story. And never, ever stop believing in yourself. Because he was just a boy from a small town, a boy from an ordinary family who dared to dream beyond the ordinary. And today, his name is written in history forever. William Shakespeare's life may have ended, but his story will never, ever end. And now that story is in your hands. His words are yours to read, to learn from, and to share with the world. My amazing friends, you have a dream, right? Maybe you want to be a writer, or an actor, a speaker, a leader, or a creator. Someone who leaves a mark on this world. But sometimes fear stops you. Sometimes people doubt you. Sometimes you feel like giving up. Let me tell you something powerful today. William Shakespeare was just like you. He was born in a small town. He didn't have a rich family. He had no special connections. No one looked at him as a child and believed he would become famous. But he had one thing. He had a dream. And that dream changed the world. Now it is your turn. You have a fire inside of you. You have a story to tell. You have a voice that matters. Don't let fear stop you. Don't let other people tell you that you can't do it. Because the truth is, you can. You are stronger than you think. You are greater than you believe. You are one step away from changing your life forever. So my friends, never stop chasing your dream. Start today. Work hard. Never give up. And one day, just like Shakespeare, your name will be remembered. Now, if this story inspired you even just a little bit, then please like this video. So I know that you felt the power of this message. And in the comments below, tell me, what is your dream? Let's inspire each other. And please subscribe and hit the bell icon, because we are on a journey together, a journey of learning, growing, and becoming unstoppable. My amazing friends, your future is waiting for you. Go and make history, and always remember the words of Shakespeare himself. It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. Maybe, just maybe, you are the next great storyteller the world is waiting for. I will see you in the next video. Stay inspired. Stay unstoppable.